Hello and welcome to En-Psych-Lopedia. We hope you're ready to be frightened because this video is on a very scary subject known as
terror management theory.
But terror management theory really doesn't have anything to do with fear or terror, at least not in the traditional being chased by a tiger sense of the word. And just a disclaimer for all these psychology experts out there, this theory has been around for nearly 4 decades and we can only cover so much in one video. So, if we missed something you really wanted us to talk about, forgive us. Mention it in the comments below and maybe we'll do a follow-up video. So what is terror management theory? Terror management theory is more about self-esteem than the adrenaline that you feel while watching a scary movie or running from a tiger. Terror management theory is based in both social and evolutionary psychology, and it posits that while people have evolved awesome complex mental capabilities like self-reflection, symbolic and temporal thought, this also poses a slight problem. We are plagued with the knowledge that we will one day die, or as the founders of the theory, Greenberg, Pazinski, and Solomon elegantly put it, we have the capacity to wonder why we exist and to consider the possibility that the universe is an uncontrollable, absurd setting in which the only inevitability is our own ongoing decay towards absolute annihilation, which, to make matters worse, could occur at any moment because of any one of a variety of chances. That sentence alone puts the terror in terror management theory. Both real-world threats, say the most recent pandemic for example, or existential threats such as the contemplation of our own death, can cause immense strain on our self-esteem. So much so that without some sort of coping mechanism, we would be totally paralyzed with fear. At this point, we're guessing you're itching for the management part of the terror management theory. Well, the authors of this theory suggest that there are 2 ways that people defend against mortality salience, meaning the knowledge of our own impending doom. There are proximal defenses, and there are distal defenses. A proximal defense is conscious attempt to reduce our fear and anxiety when considering our own death, whereas distal defenses are unconscious and not all too obvious. Proximal defenses are tangible actions to increase safety, such as buckling up before going out for a drive. Distal defenses are ones psychologists tend to be more interested in. This could look like something as simple as just denying death as a possibility, subconsciously pushing it out of our minds, which equates to little more than sticking our heads in the sand in the face of an oncoming existential train. However, sometimes we cannot deny that death is a real and approaching possibility. So what then? The authors theorize that people will feel a more strong connection to things that are of cultural significance. After all, even if we die, things like our liberal versus conservative ideology, our love for a sports team, or love for religion all live on. While we all die and this terrifies all of us, personally identifying with a culture allows us to feel some sort of immortality because these cultural things live on. In short, and to review, terror management theory posits that in order to cope with the terror invoked by thoughts of our own death, people engage in proximal and distal defenses to relieve the tension. So how is terror management theory research conducted? So far we have talked about terror management theory in broad strokes, but if the proof is in the pudding, then we need to get into that pudding. When it comes to terror management theory, there is a lot of pudding. In terms of psychological research, terror management theory is an ocean of pudding. Now, with so much pudding out there, we had to pick just one tapioca cup to look at. We chose the 2002 article titled Mortality, Salience, and the Spreading Activation of Worldview Relevant Constructs, exploring the cognitive architecture of terror management. Now, even in this one tapioca cup, there's still a lot of pudding. As is so common in social psychology research, there are multiple studies reported, 7 in this one paper to be exact. So, we're going to just cover the highlights and important methods in the interest of time. We chose Experiment 1 specifically because this is an excellent demonstration of how much terror management theory research is typically conducted. The researchers recruited university students as participants. At the start of the experiment, students were asked to write about 2 assigned prompts. However, this varied based on which condition they were assigned to. The students were split into one of 2 groups. These groups included a mortality salience condition or a dental pain condition. In the mortality salience condition, in other words, making them think about their own death, participants were asked to respond to the following prompt. Please briefly describe the emotions that the thought of your own death arouses in you, and jot down as specifically as you can what you think will happen to you physically as you die and once you are physically dead. Dark, right? For the dental pain condition, participants were asked to respond to similar but different prompts. One included, please briefly describe the emotions that the thought of a painful dental procedure arouses in you, and jot down as specifically as you can what you think will happen to you physically as you undergo a painful dental procedure. Now, before we get into the results, you might be asking yourself, what in the world does dental pain have to do with terror management research? Well, the answer is simple, really. The dental pain condition acts as a control for the mortality salience condition. If the theory is correct, people will specifically activate distal defenses, or in other words, death denial, or more strongly identifying with cultural factors when prompted to think about death, and not just uncomfortable thoughts in general. Dental pain represents a general uncomfortable thought, whereas mortality salience is the real deal existential terror. This is an important distinction. After each group wrote about their given prompts, they were given 3 tasks. One was the simple positive and negative affect schedule, or the PANAS for short. This is a brief questionnaire that measures positive and negative affect. Who would have guessed? Ideally, both the dental pain and mortality salience condition would experience the same levels of negative and positive affect. That way, we know it is truly the manipulation, or in other words, mortality salience versus dental pain, affecting whatever results we find. The second task was a timed 3-minute word search, which was a distractor task. You see, distal defenses are by nature unconscious, so trying to assess the effects of writing about your own death too quickly can confound the effect. This word search gives the participants a brief moment to recuperate from the writing task, and this allows their defenses to go from the more conscious proximal to unconscious distal. The last task is a word fragment task, and we'll tell you what exactly this task measures in a moment as a part of the grand reveal of the effect. Participants would see incomplete words like this: F blank blank G or PATR blank blank blank. Participants were asked to fill in the blanks. Again, what is a typical distal defense response to considering one's own death? That's right, rooting oneself in things they find culturally significant. Participants in the dental pain condition were more likely to fill in the blanks to make words such as frog or patrols. However, the mortality salience condition were more likely to fill in the blanks to make words such as flag or patriot. There were 26 word fragments that could either be neutral like frog or nationalistic like flag. Participants in the mortality salience condition were significantly more likely to see nationalistic words than the participants in the dental pain condition. Notably, the positive and negative affect was similar between the conditions as measured by PANAS. This suggests that it wasn't the discomfort of the subject that caused the difference, but purely the thought of death. This suggests that just the thought of one's own death can nudge someone to see more nationalistic themes. You can see how this supports Greenberg, Paninsky's, and Solomon's original theory. By evoking thoughts of death, the researchers subtly made individuals identify with something cultural and bigger than themselves. In this case, it was their nation. While we won't go into the methods of each of these findings, here are some other things that people more strongly identify with when mortality salience is primed: sports teams, religion, political ideology, their country, even their race and ethnicity. Because another culture can represent a threat to the feelings of immortality that this distal defense provides, even nudging people to becoming slightly more prejudiced. What are some of the implications of these findings? Take note, while laboratory experiments are often confined to small writing tasks, mortality salience can hit us in big ways in the real world. What sort of effect do you think major events have on society's psyche? How about 9/11? How about the Ebola scare? How about the most recent pandemic? Doesn't political polarization seem worse now more than ever? Could terror management theory and these psychological defenses be playing a role? Why are preventative measures never taken to stave off supposed Russian or Chinese election meddling from either party, and instead, the issue is raised only during or near election seasons? Why do immigrant caravans seem to spawn in and out of existence every 2 to 4 years? If the theorists are correct, fear-mongering uses terror management principles as a nudge to make people more firmly embrace their ideology. Get out to the polls and vote like your immortality depends on it. Finally, to wrap up everything, we must mention that terror management theory is not perfect. If it were, scientists would call it a law, not a theory. Many, and we mean many, well-established psychological researchers dislike this theory. To put it kindly, some go as far as outright dismissing the theory altogether. Some believe that other theories, such as the sociometer theory, offer far better explanations for behaviors we observe. Also, like so many other studies, the concept of terror management theory has come under fire during the Replication Crisis. The Replication Crisis deserves a video all on its own, and therefore we will not go too much into detail here. However, know that in the early 2010s, researchers began to realize that much of the classic psychological research that took place from 1960s to about 2010 were not replicating properly. In science, replication is everything. If a finding does not replicate, then there is no reason to believe it is anything other than a fluke. It has no value. In 2020, the Many Labs initiative took on terror management theory. Many Labs is a group that organizes many labs from around the country trying to replicate scientific findings. Of the 17 labs participating in the replication, none found results supporting the initial research. Now, before you're tempted to dismiss terror management theory altogether, know that science is tricky, almost annoying sometimes. While this is a harmful blow to the theory, there are criticisms to the criticisms. Some of the methodology used in many lab studies have been questioned. Criticisms of the criticisms withstanding, literally hundreds of other studies have successfully and conceptually replicated results that support terror management theory. But then there are things like the file drawer effect, which may deserve a video on its own. In short, science is complicated, and all we can do is our best to understand and evaluate the evidence. What do you think of terror management theory? Do you think that it is true? Or that maybe the theorists should go back to the drawing board? Let us know in the comments. Also, let us know if there are any psychological topics you are dying to know more about and want us to do a deep dive on. If you learned something, leave a like, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe. And if you really liked what you saw and want to support our team make more videos like these, consider visiting our Patreon. We'll see you next time.